Imagine being trapped inside the tail section of a bomber as it breaks apart in mid-air at 20,000 feet without a parachute. This is the true story of Eugene Moran, the man who defied death in a way that seems impossible to believe. November 29th, 1943. The sky over Germany is filled with more than 300 American bombers. In the most vulnerable position of the B-17, nicknamed Rikki Tikki Tavi, isolated in the tail of the aircraft, sits Eugene Moran, known simply as Gene. His job is to watch the rear and protect the crew from any attack coming from behind. On this day, he had no idea he would experience what many would consider impossible. The mission is clear. Bomb Bremen, one of the most heavily defended industrial cities in Nazi Germany, just 10 minutes from the target when tension reaches its peak. All eyes scan the horizon, searching for signs of the enemy. Suddenly, the pilot's voice explodes over the intercom. "Bandits, 12 o'clock high!" German pilots know well the vulnerability of B-17s. Attacking head-on and in a straight line, they can avoid the upper turret and ball turret gunners. A formation of Bf-110s advances like predators against the flying fortresses. But this time, they bring something new: 21-centimeter Werfer granite rockets, a devastating weapon. The Bf-110s fire. A barrage of rockets cuts through the air toward the tight bomber formation. The pilot of Rikki Tikki Tavi, young First Lieutenant Linwood Langley, only 21 years old, can barely process the danger when a rocket screams past the cockpit. "Holy cow, did you see that?" he shouts, still in shock. From the back of the aircraft, the tail gunner's voice echoes, "Tail to crew, a fort went down." First, the rockets clear the way, then the machine guns. The Bf-110s are now close enough and open fire with full force. As the German fighters roar past the formation, the navigator, Second Lieutenant Jesse Orison, is positioned with his side gun, ready for combat. Within seconds, the enemies cut through the formation. "Get 'em, Gene!" someone yells over the intercom. In the tail, Gene is more than ready. He fires at the 110s as they streak straight ahead and then split into pairs. Squinting through the plexiglass, he sees small distant dots. More aircraft. Many more. "Bandits! 5 o'clock high!" Gene shouts as, coming from above and behind, emerges the largest swarm of German aircraft he's ever seen in his life. Bf-109s and the dreaded FW-190s, nicknamed Butcher Birds. Chaos takes over the sky. The world transforms into a turbulent mass of spinning aircraft, crisscrossing tracer fire and explosions. "Jesus, there's so many!" someone yells. Empty shell casings rapidly accumulate on the floor as all gun positions fire non-stop. 3 o'clock, level! The intercom boils with gunners' voices calling out enemy positions. 12 o'clock high! I got one! For a brief moment, it seems the Germans are retreating. "I think they're pulling back, watch for flak!" But the threat has only changed form. Ahead, dirty clouds of explosions appear in the sky. "Flak, 11 o'clock low!" The sky becomes covered with 88mm anti-aircraft fire. Some German planes pull away from their own flak, but others, the most determined, ignore the danger and continue pressing the attack. The B-17s are violently shaken as flak explodes around them. American bombers are hit and begin falling. From his position, Moran can see them leaving formation, falling behind and below, some on fire, others dropping like stones. "Pilot to bombardier, Curtis, you ready to drop?" "Yes, sir! Bomb bay doors opening!" The doors open with a metallic groan. The crew anxiously waits for the signal from the lead aircraft. "Drop those damn bombs already!" Finally, they're released. Bombardier Donald Curtis triggers the mechanism. Bombs away! The aircraft immediately becomes lighter and rises as the bombs plummet toward the target below. The doors close again and Langley turns the plane toward home. The flak, thankfully, begins to diminish. Damage report. Navigator, all clear. Ball turret, all clear. Just some holes in the wings and fuselage. We look good, Lieutenant. The captain is surprised. The fortresses truly live up to their reputation for toughness. Pressure looks good. All 4 engines appear untouched and continue roaring normally. Deep relief washes over the crew. We're gonna make it. But before those words fade in the air, another shout cuts through the brief moment of peace. Bandits! They're back! An even larger swarm of enemy fighters is spotted coming from above. Man your guns! All the men freeze for a second, staring at the absurd number of aircraft heading their way. The Germans have returned, thirsty for revenge after the Bremen bombing. Show 'em what we got, boys! The thunder of cannons and shells fills every inch of the bomber as the entire formation lights up the sky with tracers. 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock. The formation is attacked from all angles simultaneously. Fortresses explode and fall amid absolute chaos. But the crew of Rikki Tikki Tavi is too busy fighting for their lives to process what's happening around them. Gene aims at an FW-190, streaking past at high speed, then quickly adjusts to a BF-109. He's not sure if he hit either of them. There's no time to confirm. He picks another target and keeps firing. 2 o'clock high, look out! Suddenly, the B-17 shakes violently under the impact of another heavy burst and begins, slowly, to fall away from the formation. Gene notices immediately. The gap between them and the main group is growing fast. What's happening? Quickly, he looks over both shoulders. No smoke coming from the engines. All 4 right cyclones appear to be running, but something is terribly wrong. A B-17 within formation is already vulnerable, but alone, isolated, it's a guaranteed death sentence. Gradually, the other gunners begin to notice and communicate over the intercom. We're falling behind. What's going on? Langley? No response from the captain. Gene yells into the microphone. What's the problem? Why aren't we holding formation? The silence is even more terrifying than the gunfire. The gap between them and the safety of the formation continues growing. Then finally, over the radio comes a broken message. We're being pushed out. Whether it was the captain or co-pilot, no one could tell. But within minutes, the B-17 was completely isolated. And the Germans notice. Like sharks sensing blood in the water, they identify Rikki Tikki Tavi's vulnerability and begin their deadly work. The sound of machine guns mixes with the screams of men being hit. The plane continues flying straight and level, but there's no more communication from the cockpit. No commands, no signal. In many interviews over the years, Gene became too emotional to give details of what happened in the following minutes. However, in the excellent book Tailspin, written by John Armbruster, a close friend of Gene's, it's documented that from the bottom of the bomber, in the most vulnerable position of all, the ball turret gunner, Wilbert Provost, nicknamed Pee-wee and Gene's best friend, shouted over the intercom, "Mo, there's a bastard coming right at us. He's coming straight for us." And then the last words Gene would hear from his best friend, "Buddy, I'm done for." Gene screamed for his friend, heard the shots piercing the metal, heard the plexiglass shattering. A final scream echoes through the intercom. A twin-engine Messerschmitt fighter pulls up in an arc, passing the bomber's rear right in front of Gene's guns. With tears in his eyes and rage in his heart, Gene fires his .50 calibers at the German fighter, hits it. A trail of black smoke pours from the stricken machine, which disappears from view. Nothing was ever heard from Pee-wee again. Never again. At that moment, something unexpected happens. A BF-109 approaches from the side, keeping distance. Gene tries to swing his guns to the right, but the German knows perfectly the B-17's firing arc. He remains outside the danger zone, hovering there like a ghost. Gene looks through the sight, and then his eyes meet the German pilot's eyes. For a brief instant, the war disappears. The German makes a gesture, points at Gene, then points at the ground. Gene just stares, trying to process. The German repeats the gesture, more emphatic, and then Gene understands. He's being given a chance to jump, to abandon the aircraft and survive. Is he the only one left? Has the rest of the crew already died or jumped? He can see the other German planes waiting in the distance, watching. It's literally a life or death decision, but Gene would never get to make that decision. The temporary truce is broken by the sharp sound of gunfire. Someone on Rikki Tikki Tavi is still alive, still fighting and shooting at the German. Whatever option Gene might have considered evaporates in the air. For a moment, the Bf-109 turns sharply and disappears. And then, like a furious wave, the German aircraft surge en masse to deliver the killing blow. The rear of the bomber becomes an apocalyptic storm of metal shrapnel and fire. Gene is violently thrown to the floor. With superhuman effort, he crawls back to his position and tries to fire his guns. But they don't respond. Jammed. Operating almost on autopilot, ignoring the pain, he frantically begins working on the gun. Hope briefly fills his heart when he gets one of the machine guns firing again. But it's at that exact moment that more bullets hit the aircraft and hit Gene. He screams in pain and anguish as both arms are pierced and broken, bones crack. But even with two broken arms hanging uselessly, he somehow manages to fire a few more shots before being hit in the chest. Several ribs shatter with the impact. The tail gun position is now a vision of total destruction. Blood, twisted metal, smoke. The entire aircraft shakes violently and lurches in its final agony. Gene feels himself pressed against his seat as the bomber begins plummeting from the sky. His parachute is completely destroyed, torn to pieces, but there's a spare near the tail wheel. With his blurred vision, he can see some crew members, but they're lying down, motionless, lifeless. An anguished groan of metal being torn fills the air. He feels the floor beneath him move strangely, almost as if it's being pulled backward. He grabs what he can with his destroyed hands, sees the sky through an opening, and then, in slow motion, sees the main fuselage pulling away, separating from the tail. Desperate, he clings to the floor of the tail section with whatever strength he still possesses. Screaming in pain behind his oxygen mask, he watches in horror as Rikki Tikki Tavi falls below him, plummeting toward Earth while he remains trapped in the tail section that broke away. The tail is falling, and he's inside it. In the front of the plummeting bomber, navigator Jesse Orison and bombardier Donald Curtis fire at the aircraft surrounding them. Too many, too fast. Bullets pierce the nose plexiglass, seriously wounding Curtis and throwing him backward against Orison. The plane enters a spin. Orison struggles with his companion's lifeless body and miraculously manages to clip on a parachute before all the nose plexiglass completely shatters. He's sucked out of the aircraft. Broken glass deeply cuts his legs as he falls. He pulls the ripcord, screaming in pain. It's at this moment he sees something surreal. The tail section of Rikki Tikki Tavi falling separately, spinning through the air. He remembers perfectly seeing the rudder and elevators swaying as the tail rotated and plummeted, but he had no way of knowing. Little did he know that his friend was still inside, trapped in that flying coffin. There were at least 3 eyewitnesses on the ground who saw the tail separate and fall. Some more fanciful versions that circulated later even reported that Gene continued firing at the Germans while falling inside the tail. But, according to Gene himself, that definitely didn't happen. The truth was much worse. Inside the free-falling tail, the force of rotation is absolutely torturous. The spin speed and air pressure pin him in place, as if glued there. Unable to move even an inch, a red shadow completely blocks his vision as blood enters his eyes. He can't see, can't move, can only feel the rotation and wait for impact. The fall seems to take forever. The tail falls, and then hits the treetops with a violence no human should experience and survive. The impact is brutal, But Gene is still conscious, still alive. Through his damaged, blood-blurred vision, Gene sees a faint light at the end of what looks like a tunnel. With his broken arms useless, he begins crawling toward the light, feels indescribable pain in his fractured bones, can feel his own loose teeth moving in his mouth. But still he crawls, inch by inch, toward the light, and then he falls again. When he finally opens his eyes, miraculously, he finds himself on the floor of a European forest. The tail section of Rikki Tikki Tavi hangs above him, tangled in the trees like a gigantic nest of twisted metal. He lies there for a moment, euphoric, in shock, alive. He survived, but at what cost? He carefully touches his head, using his broken arms, and feels something no man should feel. There's a crack in his skull, an opening so large he can feel the soft texture in the gap. He's touching his own exposed brain. Suddenly he hears voices. He expects to be killed by locals who occasionally take revenge on bomber crews, but feels momentary relief when he realizes the voices are speaking French. Expecting to find a dead man, French workers from a nearby field and several German soldiers supervising them find Gene. They're absolutely shocked to see him alive. He's roughly dragged through the forest and transported to a prisoner of war camp, where a Serbian doctor performs emergency surgery, placing a metal plate in Gene's head to cover the exposed brain and protect it from infection. But Gene's wounds weren't just physical. While slowly recovering in the POW camp hospital, he suffered from constant nightmares. Every night, he relived the fall, woke up screaming, sweating, falling again in that endless nightmare. Eventually, Gene recovered from his physical injuries enough to survive the rest of the war as a prisoner. After the camp's liberation in 1945, he was repatriated along with his friend Jesse Orison, the only other survivor of Rikki Tikki Tavi. In 2022, 8 years after Gene Moran's death, his friend John Armbruster published the book Tailspin, telling Gene's complete story in detail. It's an exceptional work we highly recommend for anyone wanting to learn more about this extraordinary chapter of World War II. This is the true story of the tail gunner who fell from the sky inside a bomber's tail section and survived to tell the tale. Eugene Moran defied the impossible. If you were amazed by this story of survival against all odds, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. There are thousands of incredible World War II stories that deserve to be told. Which one would you like to hear next? Leave it in the comments. And remember, behind every war statistic, there's a human story that deserves to be remembered.